Psalm 123, the fourth of the 15 songs of ascent, begins in almost exactly the same way as it's Psalm 121, with that phrase, I lift up my eyes. And as we saw in that psalm, the psalmist makes it clear he's not looking to the hills for help, but to the Lord, to Yahweh, who made the hills. Now in 123, the psalmist cuts straight to the chase, as it were. To you, I lift up my eyes. So as he approaches Jerusalem and the tabernacle or temple for worship, this worshipper is fully aware that the glories of the city and the place of worship are merely representative, symbolic, if you like. He looks beyond and behind them to the living God who dwells not in a city or building made with hands, however splendid it may be, as David reflected in Psalm 122, but to the one who is enthroned, as he says, in the heavens. And just as the fact that God is the maker of heaven and earth in Psalm 121, and therefore has authority over all the forces at work in the universe, so here, the fact that God is enthroned in the heavens assures the believing man or woman that all authority and all power is his. And there is nothing that we can ask of him that is outside his jurisdiction or beyond his capability. And there are two key connected thoughts in the 4 verses of this short psalm. The emphasis in verses 1 to 2 is on the word eyes. And you'll notice that that word occurs 4 times. In the second half of the psalm, the emphasis is on mercy, and the word appears twice in that second pair of verses. But also, and importantly, it comes at the end of verse 2 in the first section. So it provides a sort of bridge or link to the second half. It explains what the eyes are doing. So notice in the first half, the 2 examples he gives about looking. Now, these 2 examples are not difficult even for us, who are fortunate not to live in a world where servants and slaves are the norm. But the point he's making would have been much more obvious to the original listeners or readers of this psalm. In verse 2, the attitude of the worshipper needs to be the same as the worker, who is totally dependent on their master. The servant or slave was 100% dependent on their master or mistress. Not only could they hardly take a breath without their permission, but they looked to or were dependent on them for food, for shelter, for provision, for instruction, and so on. I could be so bold as to change the analogy to one we may be more familiar with. It's like the remarkable relationship you often see between a much-loved dog and their owner. Watch how the dog is constantly attentive to their owner, sitting at their feet, eyes fixed on the owner's face, eagerly waiting for the next instruction or the next treat. Watch them as their stomach or their instinct tells them that it's nearly time for food, and they will go and almost annoy their owner, never taking their eyes off their face. Friends, as humans, never mind as believers, we ought to live like that before our God, never taking our eyes off him, which is, of course, what is meant by the hand, which is the human instrument by which instructions are given, by which provision is made. The old hymn writers understood this, didn't they? Think of all I have needed, thy hand hath provided, or thy hand, O Lord, has guided. There's a more modern song which says, by faith we see the hand of God in the lives of those who prove his faithfulness. I was struck recently how often in Ezra and Nehemiah, originally one book by one author, you get the phrase, the good hand of the Lord was on us. And there's another aspect of this principle which we ought to heed. When in trouble or danger or doubt, when in the midst of a storm, don't look at the waves or the wind, Don't look at the enemy or the loved one for whom you are concerned. Look to the one enthroned in the heavens. Can I ask you today, where are your eyes fixed? Don't look to your bank balance. Don't look to your GP. Don't look to your employer. Don't look to your wife or your husband, to your pastor or your spiritual mentor. Look to the one enthroned in the heavens. But what are we looking to him for? Now, in one sense, we have already answered that question. We look to him for everything. But we also have to be faithful to the context and burden of this particular psalm. And the answer lies in the second key word of the psalm, that word, mercy. We lift up our eyes to the Lord till he has mercy upon us, says the psalmist. Now, in a more general sense, mercy refers to that disposition of God towards those in great need. A.W. Pink defines the mercy of God as, quote, the ready inclination of God to relieve the misery of fallen creatures. And in a sense, everything we have is by the mercy of God. Because if we received from him what we deserved, we would all of us be in hell right now. So the next breath we breathe, measures of health and strength, food on the table, etc., 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 they're all the mercies of God. That's what we look to his hand for. We are not entitled to, we're not deserving of these things, but we are poor, helpless creatures and we need them. But narrowing down the context again, the writer of Psalm 123 especially seeks God's mercy because of the continuous contempt and scorn, the ridicule that he is experiencing from those around him, and he's just had enough of it. In a way the psalmist couldn't have understood. The mercy of God comes to us through the person of Christ. And you remember that the writer to the Hebrews encourages us to go regularly to the throne of grace, to our sympathetic great high priest, to receive mercy and find grace. In his great work, The Treasury of David, Charles Spurgeon says we should lift our eyes to the Lord reverently, obediently, attentively, continuously, expectantly, singly, submissively, and imploringly. To which, if I could be so bold, I would add one more adverb, believingly. So turn your eyes upon Jesus, because he is the hand by which God, who is enthroned in the heavens, dispenses mercy. Let me close with this verse from Edward Plumpter's great hymn. Thy hand, O Lord, has guided. And here's the verse. Thy mercy will not fail us, nor leave thy work undone. With thy right hand to help us, the victory shall be won. And then by men and angels thy name shall be adored. And this shall be their anthem. One church, one faith, one Lord.